1945. This was one of the country's first two systems, opened in 1911, the other being at Bradford. Destined for Doncaster, this double-decker garret was making a test run on the company-owned Mexborough and Swinton system. In just a handful of places, the trolleybus was responsible for all municipal transport. In Ipswich, for example, from 1927 to 1950. Here, some veterans clocked up 25 years of service. From the mid-20s, the vehicles have begun to look less like railless buses or trackless trams. For example, Guy Motors produced this pneumatic-tired trolleybus in 1926. For many undertakings anxious to dispose of their trams, the trolleybus was a godsend. Two of the first big changeovers at Hastings and Wolverhampton came at the end of the 20s. This is Wolverhampton, erstwhile home of Guy Motors. Guy also held sway in Hastings, which for a very brief time had the largest trolleybus undertaking in the world. Then came the London explosion. Things had started modestly enough with a fleet of AEC six-wheelers. Known affectionately as diddlers, these were confined to the fringes of the metropolis. Then between 1935 and 1940, twin wires sprouted everywhere, rapidly reducing tram operation to a hefty rump mainly south of the Thames. Fleet strength rose to 1,600 vehicles. Outwardly, they all had a strong family resemblance, even though there were several different types of body and chassis by both AEC and Leyland. Included were a few oddities. With four-wheel steering at the front, this chassisless Leyland dated from 1939. During the 30s, ever more life-expired tramways were condemned as inflexible and old-fashioned, whilst the in-favour electric buses were hailed as comfortable, smooth-running and noiseless. In fact, some were so quiet they were chillingly nicknamed silent deaths. Their long-term prospects appeared excellent. A three-axle vehicle could match the capacity of a tram, new extensions could be built more cheaply, and they still consumed locally produced electricity. Between the wars, most people holidayed at home, thousands migrating each summer towards the coast. By the end of the 20s, the country was crisscrossed by a vast web of long-distance coach services. To accommodate the sharers, many towns built special terminals. As fares tended to be cheaper than the train, huge crowds would cram onto every available coach during the summer months. Probably the most famous coach station was here at Victoria in London. In 1928-9, this unusual Daimler, with bunks for 12, a kitchen, and an Elson toilet ran a short-lived overnight service between Liverpool and London. Throughout the 30s, time was spent struggling to fit more people into the basic single-decker box. For example, AEC produced their distinctive Q-type with its side engine behind the front axle. Some had their doors positioned forward of the leading wheels, whilst on others they were to the rear. The double-decker Q proved too expensive, so only 23 were built, the bodies being full-fronted with either front or centre entrances. Centre entrance designs found favour with some operators. At Grimsby, a few of their trolleybuses also had them, but such experiments were not generally pursued. Full-fronted centre entrance buses were, however, part of the Blackpool scene for over 30 years. Some undertakings even had buses with doors at the front and the back. And a few double-deckers sported front doors only. On many single-deckers, the door was in the forward position. Although one-man operation was forbidden on double-deckers, it was allowed on some lightly trafficked single-deck routes. This one-man Leyland Cub with its sliding front door dated from 1939 and was among the first British buses to have a rear-engine chassis. The war turned the industry on its head. Loading soared, new buses were scarce, so old buses staggered on. Rare wartime action in Salford in 1942. Services were heavily reduced as staff were transferred to transporting troops and munition workers. After dark, life was pitch black, especially in the country, where intending passengers used torches to wave down approaching buses. To help during the blackout, mud guards and other extremities were painted white. Many older people will still have clear memories of being evacuated, armed only with a gas mask and an identifying label. These scenes show children setting off to they know not where from Edgware in North London in late 1939. Two words sum up the wartime bus scene: unfrozen and utility. Unfrozen referred to buses completed by using spare parts after all regular production had ceased in 1941. Amongst the unfrozens were some ordered for export. For example, these 8-foot wide trolley buses destined for South Africa were allocated to London Transport. The utilities began appearing in 1941 when Guy Motors was contracted to build an austerity double-decker. Eventually, some 2,500 of these rugged machines took to the streets. They typified wartime travel, many people still remembering their unforgiving wooden seats. Both Bristol and Daimler also built utility chassis. For the single-decker market, Bedford produced nearly 3,400 OWBs. Like the utility double-deckers, they could be distinguished by their angular bodywork. After the war, Bedford reverted to making its famous OB, of which an amazing 13,000 had been built when production ceased in 1951. The chassis could accommodate a 26 or a 30-seater body. This example was owned by Banstead Coaches of Surrey. There were also utility trolleybuses. Starting in 1943, both Carrier and Sunbeam built the W model. Later, many utilities, like this Chatham and District Bristol, were rebodied. After the war, nearly everyone still relied on public transport. New, up-to-date buses were urgently needed. The vehicle at the centre of a massive modernisation programme in London was the RT. Delivery of the RT had been curtailed in 1940. Now they resumed with a vengeance. By 1954, some 4,800 of these AEC regions had been built, making this the largest double-decker class with a single operator in the history of the industry. The design proved so successful, the last survivors did not bow out until 1979. The RTs were also supplemented by 1,600 Leyland RTLs and 500 8-foot-wide RTWs. By the mid-50s, the London double-decker fleet enjoyed a high level of standardization. Peak loadings were every manager's headache. Scores of buses being needed for a handful of trips per day. A convoy of packed vehicles leaves a Manchester factory area in 1946. Reflecting years of wartime neglect, many are still sporting the city's distinctive pre-war streamline livery. There now follows a fascinating potpourri of buses in various parts of the country during the magical 50s. These were the years before the arrival of the high-capacity rear-engine vehicles which still hold sway today. The 50s were also a decade of profound change as the increasingly costly labour-intensive industry began to lose passengers by the thousands. Action here in 1951 in the West Country with a variety of Bristol Omnibus Company vehicles loading at Filton. In the northeast, a pair of United Automobile Bristols pass a Gateshead District Leyland PD2. Next, a Wayman-bodied AEC Regent. AEC Regents also abounded at Oxford Bus Station in 1952. Among them was this Bristol departing for Swindon. More glistening City of Oxford Regents grace the old university town. In Eastbourne, a Corporation Crosley DD42 is pursued by a couple of Maidstone and District Bristol Ks. Over to the Isle of Wight for a Southern Vectis Bristol L with Eastern Coachworks body. Seen at Ryde is another Bristol K-type. Here a London country area RT is followed by a Leyland Cub and a Titan. Various Bristols in Hastings. This is a Maidstone and District Bristol L. Mixing with the buses, a 1940 AEC trolleybus with a Park Royal body. At Luton, this all-Leyland PD2 is seen in 1952. It is followed by a Bristol K owned by United Counties, to whom Luton Corporation would sell out in the early 1970s. a corporation utility Bristol. Following the Leyland Gnu, another Bristol utility. A brief glimpse of a pre-war United Counties Bristol. A Bristol K eases past a 1939 underfloor flat-engine Leyland Green Line coach. Two pre-war Eastern Counties Bristol